All right, so today is June 4th. This is the Operator Framework Working Group meeting. I've got the agenda pulled up and I think we're ready to get started. So the first thing I see here is a brief for the operator conditions stuff. Edmund or uh, Nikolai, do you have any updates about this one?
Not really. We started gathering extra information, for example, of what operators will fail, which use operator conditions will fail on some other OLM v1 limitations such as webhooks, etc. But I had to switch to something else, not related to upstream. So I haven't been looking actively into that. So maybe I think Ankita and maybe Edmund were looking into that, but from me, nothing to say about this.
Yeah, just continuing with the review of the operators and trying to compile a report that gives us an idea of which operators would be broken. But yeah, nothing new beyond that.
Okay, are we ready to have any review of the brief yet? It seems like we're still sort of investigating what we even want to do. So I guess based on some of the discussion we had last week, it seems like we might want to pull this brief sort of back for a second while we decide, like, are we going to do this at all? If so, what? Or is that sort of captured in there?
Yeah, I think we haven't, like, the only thing we did, we added this list at the end of the brief, which where we listed all the operators and their status. We haven't completed gathering all the information, then we don't really have any next steps for that. But yes, we might need to reconsider this. So but yeah, I think nothing really changed since we last spoke about this.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so for anyone that wasn't part of those conversations, I think the current spot we're at is investigating essentially like who uses, like which operators use the operator conditions API, and then trying to understand based on that information whether this is a critical feature to maintain support for in V1 or whether we can essentially like come up with a different solution that doesn't require us to what would amount to cargo cult the API and behavior from V0 to V1. So I think our goal is like, let's not do that if we can avoid it. And so that's what we're investigating now. So I don't think we're ready for like full on review of what was drafted up here because we're still trying to assess whether or what we want to do. I guess I would say if anyone has any knowledge at all about OLMV0 operator conditions usage, make sure to pull that up and make some comments or add something at the end about the usage you know about. Okay, moving on. Do we have any other briefs? I know that we've started some designs and stuff for kicking off some new work. I'm just wanting to put it out there. I'm wondering if we have any briefs in the draft state or not. I'm trying to even remember what the other work was. But I guess my question is like, if anyone has any briefs that they're working on, please go ahead and add them, even if they're not fully ready yet.
Hey Joe, I have one question. So with respect to the Legy consensus date, how do we do we have any prior precedent? Like how do we decide the Legy consensus date? Is it like we keep it like a month or so, or how does it work?
So in the past, we had put it like somewhat far out into the future, and that ended up not being great because things moved more slowly than they really needed to. So in my opinion, I think what we should do is try to make those lazy consensus dates, bring them in more and try to make sure like whoever's the feature architect or sort of the drafter of the brief, like treat it like we would a code review. And so we don't expect a code review to sit open for a month. So like go and solicit reviews and get things moving quickly. So I would say like maybe a week is probably a more reasonable lazy consensus date with the extra sort of like whoever drafted the thing needs to go out and solicit reviews such that it could actually finish within a week. But we can,
So yeah. So sorry, please go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt.
I was just gonna say, like, that's, I mean, that's just my opinion. So if
Yeah.
others have other opinions, by all means.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, the legit considerations come to picture once I think the draft is ready, right? So currently it is work in progress. So I think once we take my understanding is the draft is still work in progress. So I think once it is out of work in progress, then we can come up with a legit consensus date. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the state for this one in particular is we're still doing some investigation that will result in more changes to that brief. So until the brief is sort of ready for review, we're not going to set a lazy consensus date on it.
Right. No, makes sense. Thank you.
And I think, let's see, we should probably update this and then, so it's in status draft, so that's good. Might just want to remove this June due date and only add that when essentially it's the same thing as the lazy consensus date. So Edmund or Nikolai, if you don't mind doing that in the background, that might, if anybody's looking at this, that might make it a little more clear. Okay, I don't think we had any action items from last week, so nothing to talk about there unless anybody has anything that they know about. Okay, silence, I assume, is nothing. Jordan mentioned that he put some stuff on the agenda. I'm checking. I don't see Jordan here, which doesn't surprise me because he said he had some other things to deal with. But I can try to give this my best shot. So essentially, we're looking at a few updates on the catalog authorship side of OLM, and this applies really to V0 and V1. But there's a few things. So one is we want to be able to support binary list catalogs. So in a recent, well, it's not that recent, I guess, OLM for maybe, I don't know, 6 months or so has supported a mode where you can set up a catalog source to ask it to extract the catalog data into a separate pod that OLM runs for the catalog rather than using the catalog image itself to run the catalog. And so one of the benefits there is that you don't actually have to put a binary in the catalog image anymore, which means you don't have to worry about multi-arch concerns and you get much smaller images. And so to support all of that, one thing that we want to do is get the OPM generate command, OPM generate Docker file command to help with building a binary list catalog. So that's one PR there. Another is we've been chatting with some of the pipelines that are building, the owners of the pipelines that build catalogs. There's a few inside Red Hat that are starting to essentially like support FBC being provided from operator authors. And we had this one catalog template called the composite template, which was an early stab at trying to sort of provide the catalog maintainer and the operator author with sort of like a contribution that they could make, where the catalog author and maintainer would say, here's the destinations that I support, and here's some of the guardrails that I want you to use when you provide your contributions. And then the operator author would be able to specify some stuff that about their contributions. As it turns out, the pipeline maintainers that we've been dealing with, like they didn't really latch on to this concept very well. And as we started talking about it, we realized like a lot of the policy side of the composite template like probably doesn't belong in OPM. So once you remove the policy side of the composite template, it essentially is down to some code that knows how to say, well, this fragment goes with these destinations, which is much simpler implemented as like a bash for loop that says like, for these destinations, copy this fragment to this place. So our plan right now is to essentially deprecate the composite catalog template and work with those pipelines to do some really fairly minor tweaks in order to continue working the same way that they did before. And if there's any questions, feel free to interrupt. And then lastly, another thing we've been talking about is that there's sort of a difference between the template schemas that we support. Specifically, it's the basic template. So if you look at the like now down to essentially two templates, right? There's basic and Semver. Semver had its own schema associated with it. So you could say like, I can't remember exactly what the schema name is off the top of my head, but you can basically say like in an FBC style, here's a Semver template. Here's the fast candidate and stable entries for my operator. Here's my package name. And then you can run OPM generate, render, template, Semver, and then give it the name. But with the basic template, it didn't have any knowledge that it was actually a basic template. The schema for the basic template was just raw FBC essentially, except for the bundles, you wouldn't have to put anything other than schema is OLM.bundle and the image name. And we realized that was a bit problematic because we couldn't sort of self-discover which template to run by looking at the template file that defined how to run the template. So this last PR is taking a stab at essentially formally defining the basic template with its own schema and then embedding all of the basic template information under a schema rather than having it look like flat FBC. And with that change, what that means is we can have a more generic OPM render template command. It can just inspect the file that you hand it to know which underlying templater to run, rather than you having to tell it explicitly. So this will just make our CLI a little bit more simple, because you won't have to explicitly on the CLI say which template to run. Jordan, I noticed you editing in here. Are you here? Maybe not. Okay, that's all right. Any?
Yeah, I have one question. So Jordan, I think the discussion topics mostly that you want reviews on this PS, right? Or is it something else?
I think primarily reviews. I think this one probably, like, if people have some concerns with deprecating the composite template, like we could talk about that right now. Otherwise, reviews, I think, is what he's looking for.
Got it. Thank you.
Can you just explain the composite one again?
Yeah.
What was the use case?
So the use case was trying to sort of bridge. If you can imagine a pipeline where a catalog maintainer says, I want to provide some policy about what can be contributed into my catalog. And so the composite template had a schema where a catalog maintainer could essentially provide some policy. And specifically, that policy looked like, in the context of this composite template, the policy looked like, here are the catalog destinations. So you can imagine the destinations being the operator hub catalog, or Joe's custom whiz bang catalog, or whatever, right? Like you could imagine a catalog author, or maybe you'd want to have something that's like, I have catalogs that are specific to Kubernetes versions. And so I have a 1.27, a 1.28, and a 1.29 catalog. And so the catalog maintainer, the pipeline maintainer, could set up a file that says, here's the definition for a 1.28 catalog, 1.29 catalog, or 1.30 catalog, with the intent to say, like, these are the ones that I'll support. These are the catalogs that will build from this pipeline. And then there's a bit of other policy there where you could say for the 1.28 catalog, I only want contributors to be able to use the basic template, for example. And you could have like options for that. And then on the contributor side, so like someone who owns a package, then the idea is they provide the other half of the equation, which is like for 1.27, here's what template to use. Here's the configuration for that template. For 1.28, here's a different one. For 1.29, do the same thing as 1.28. And so the idea was like we could, if you ran the composite template, it could essentially like join the catalog author side with the operator author side and sort of do a sanity check to make sure like, are you referring to destinations that are supported, or are you using a template that the destination supports, that kind of stuff? And the motivation that we have for deprecating it is that we decided it doesn't really make sense to have like core operator framework tooling to mediate what really are pipeline concerns. And the reason that we don't think it makes sense for us to do that is because pipelines have policies that change all the time and sort of irrelevant from core FBC tooling. And so we just wanted to essentially like pull ourselves out of the policy aspect of pipelines and focus primarily just on FBC generation. So that's why you see the composite template being deprecated, but not the basic or Semper templates.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what you're saying makes sense. So in the case of someone that doesn't, an operator author that doesn't follow Semper, you know, the weird cases we've talked about in the past, they would just use the basic template then, right? And have to manage the versions themselves, right?
That would be one way. Another way would be that, so the intent that we've been providing to catalog maintainers is the thing that you need is valid FBC. That's what sort of the currency of a catalog is. At the end of the day, OLM does not care how you decided to build your catalog as long as it's valid. And so what we've been telling pipeline maintainers is that needs to be sort of the currency that you build your pipeline on. And by the way, here are some templates that we think are probably some common use cases around generating that FBC. But sort of the other side of the coin is like, we don't think that this is going to cover 100% of use cases. In fact, we know it won't. And so the pipelines need to have an escape hatch that says an operator author can use any other template that they want. They can provide FBC directly. They can write their own template and execute it. Pipeline shouldn't care. OLM doesn't care. Leave it up to the operator author. So to answer your question, like if someone doesn't like Semper template because it doesn't do exactly what they want, then yes, like they could go over and use the basic template. If that also doesn't do what they want, maybe they want Semper with a different flavor, they're free to essentially implement that Semper with a different flavor and use that themselves as well, in our opinion. So the core framework group doesn't actually own the pipeline implementations anywhere. So this is just sort of our design intent that we're trying to convey to those that build the pipelines.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks. I forgot the use case for that one because there's a number of use cases for these things. So appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Anything else on the OPM updates?
Joe, I have a question about the composite template.
Yeah.
So I remember this template thing is still in alpha, right? So I wonder, do we really need to deprecate an alpha stuff? I mean, what is the end game for deprecate this template? Are we going to actually remove this from the repo, or we just going to completely kill these things, or?
This looks like it's removing it, so I'll ask Jordan to update this to reflect that it's not a deprecation, it's a removal. But to answer your question, in my opinion, since it's alpha, we can remove it without having to issue a deprecation.
No, I mean, I think my question is about, since this is a, as far as I can remember, this thing is still fairly, relatively new, right? It's not like exists like 2 years or 3 year thing. So I wonder if we just wanted to move away from this technology, can we just, will we be better? We just keep it in the repo and then let, if anyone else is interested in this, they can pick it up. It's just there rather than just kill it completely.
Yeah, so I don't have a, yeah, I don't, well, I guess I would say, I don't think we should build it into the OPM command. Because then if people want to use it, they'll still be able to use it in the OPM command. I think we're trying to not support that. In my opinion, I think it's totally fine to just kill it. It's in the repo history. If someone wants to revive it, like we can go back and pull it out and you know, they can copy it to whatever other repo they want. And to answer your question about newness, I think it's maybe, and Jordan would be a better answer to this. I think it's maybe like 6 months to a year old. In terms of usage, I'm guessing that no one has used it in production other than we know of one group inside Red Hat that has, and they're essentially part of a pilot program that we're running, so they know everything that we're talking about, and this is already something that we've discussed with them, so everything is on the up and up. As far as unknown usage, again, it's alpha, so people should probably have an understanding that alpha stuff can change or disappear. So I don't have a major, and to be honest, I haven't seen anybody else ask about this. So I suspect that there's little to no usage of it outside of what we're already aware of. And the places that are using it, they're already aware. So in my mind, we can have those discussions with those folks that may already be using it. And if they want to keep it around, then we can hand it to them. And if not, then we can get rid of it.
Got it. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Do we want to send out an email to the community group so that, I mean, the Google group, so people are aware the thing is going to be
Yeah,
removed?
that's a good idea.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
Since Jordan's not here, I'll give him an action item. Okay. Okay, moving on. Michael, we've got a question about current state of Ruckpack.
Yeah, I kind of lost the thread a little bit. I kind of have a half understanding that I think a lot of Ruckpack is going to be moved to the operator controller, and I've been doing some Red Hat specific documentation that I will eventually go upstream. And I was, once we're removing the work on plain bundles and platform operators, what sort of, I'm just trying to see how far to pull back on Ruckpack and where it's going in the next little bit, like what the plan is for that. And I don't know if we had that outlined anywhere.
So I asked the same question. So I don't know, Varsha, if you've thought about this at all yet, but we got the Helm work merged into operator controller. So as far as I know, and Varsha, correct me if I'm wrong if you're here, but we no longer have a Ruckpack dependency in operator controller, or maybe we do, but it's because we're still partially using some APIs and stuff.
We're
Yeah,
using
that's
it as a
pretty-
library
Right,
right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
So we pull it in as a library, but we don't need it we don't need a deployment of Ruckpack.
We don't run Ruckpack, yeah, okay. And so the question I asked was like the same thing, like, okay, well, what becomes of Ruckpack? Do we eventually fold it all into operator controller, the pieces that we use, and then just archive Ruckpack? Do we remove any of the stuff that we no longer use from Ruckpack so that it truly just becomes a library for operator controller? I haven't given this much more thought since I asked the question, but Varsha has her hand up, so I'll turn it over to her.
So, just to give a brief overview on where we are right now. So currently, as Todd mentioned, we don't have a Ruckpack deployment in operator controller, but the Ruckpack itself is as it is because there was a lot of development activities going on when we were working on the Helm integration stuff. So to answer your question, Joe, we do have this plan for the next sprint to get a brief or an RFC ready to evaluate the future of Ruckpack and see what we can do as next step in terms of do we want to modify it to be a library and remove all the other bundle deployment controllers, E2E stuff and everything? Do we want to keep some kind of tests in there to make sure we have enough coverage and things like that? So to answer the question, there's no solid answer yet, but it's definitely an upcoming work that we have planned for the upcoming sprint.
Okay. Michael, to answer one of your questions specifically about plain bundles, operator controller doesn't support plain bundles. It right now just assumes that everything it sees in a catalog is a registry v1 bundle. And what ends up happening is if you give it a different kind of bundle, it'll make some assumptions about being able to try to convert that to a plain bundle. And if it doesn't see like a CSV or the right looking manifests and metadata directories, it'll fail out right now, essentially telling you like, sorry, like this doesn't look like a registry v1 bundle. So in terms of like what OLM v1 in general looks like upstream is that there is no Ruckpack that runs anymore. And so essentially that means there is no support for plain bundles anymore either because we don't run Ruckpack directly. Does that, well, I don't know if that fully answers your question, but at least on the plain bundle side, I think that's pretty definitive.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing is that at this point, it seems like Ruckpack is it's in transition, but it's an implementation detail. It's more about like contributors and like community, like but like for a user just using OLM v1 Ruckpack, just its importance as like it's not something somebody needs to be aware of. Is that where things are right now, at least? And that might change in the future, but is that a fair?
Yes, I think I would say Ruckpack is no longer, Ruckpack is just a library that's an implementation detail. There's no user-facing Ruckpack
Got it.
APIs or behavior or anything. It's all just the cluster extension API and the catalog API.
Okay, great. Thank you.
On that note, I just wanted to add one more thing. Regardless of the future of Ruckpack, in terms of library or whatever it is, it's going to be a dev implementation detail. But I think in terms of documentation, we should probably be having some kind of issue or epic. I don't know what's the right thing, Michael, to go ahead with updating the document on the plain bundle support and things like that. Do we want to go ahead and track it as an issue on the dashboard, or do we want to handle all the documentation in a separate epic now that it's merged?
The way things are shaking out right now, probably what'll happen is it'll be not a perfect upstream first approach, but what'll probably happen is I will take the changes in the upcoming OpenShift release and then kind of backport them to the upstream with the sort of plain bundle and changes and stuff like that. But I can create a ticket for that, so that we can track it.
I think I would suggest, like, if we're gonna do an upstream ticket for that, we probably hang it off of the ruck pack. Or I'm sorry, that helmet, that big helm integration PR, because that's where the change actually happened, right?
Okay, yep.
Do you agree with that, Varsha?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yep.
Okay, that's the end of our agenda. Any other last minute topics that anybody wants to discuss? Okay, roadmap, I don't think anything has changed since last week. So I don't feel the need to pull this up and look at it again, but if anybody has any specific questions about the roadmap, I'm happy to open it up and talk about it. All right, hearing nothing, so we'll give folks 25 minutes back and see everybody next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone.